If you were a mad scientist and you wanted to crash a meteor into the Earth and wipe it all away, capital A, all away, how would you do that? It's a very silly hypothetical, but I promise you it is relevant to today's topic. Well, if you wanted to do that, the first step is, of course, you'll need help. It's a monumental task. You need experts in the fields that you don't understand so you can outsource the educational things. And you also have to convince them, all these scientists or whatever, that crashing a meteor into the Earth is a fantastic idea. But then you need more people, right? Not experts. You need the experts to plan the course of the meteor and do all that stuff, but you also need experts to build the ship or the drone that's going to redirect some spacebound object towards us. You need a whole economy to be able to support those people and all the factory workers that are producing these things. And all of a sudden you realize the simple dream of crashing a meteor into the Earth has grown into a rather large enterprise. And it just keeps getting bigger until it's achieved, until the meteor hits Earth. Now, why do I tell this ridiculous story about a mad scientist? Well, the slaves to darkness as we know them, as the predominant enemy in the mortal realms, the darkness that consumed whole worlds, all began because one man cursed his god and wanted to wipe it all away. All being the universe. It is the story of Archaon, the Ever-Chosen. And although others have come before him, he's not the first Ever-Chosen, that's a title that's bestowed. He is the one that has gone further than any other. He pulled together the most powerful artifacts of the old world and then destroyed the planet itself with the power of chaos. And yet, life persisted, and therefore, so does the torment. And Archaon the Ever-Chosen, Ender of Worlds, was brought from the realm of chaos with a new task. Claim the mortal realms in the black gauntlet of the Chaos Gods. He is a man who hates the divine, the false gods of order, Sigmar of course the most, but he also despises the cursed pantheon that he plays like a fiddle. He takes what he wants from them. He leads them on and then just to spite one another. He keeps the Chaos Gods quarreling while reaping the rewards of their eternal avarice. They always want more, it's never enough, I'll give you whatever if I could just stick it to Korn or Nurgle or whatever. Because just like our scientist in our initial story, he has a bigger goal. The goal to end it all. No gods, no divinity. Just a land of absolute chaos where might makes right, knowing full well that he has already established himself as the mightiest of all. A man who could defeat a god and make others pause. Today we are talking about Archaon, the 8 points, the Varanspire, and more as we continue our exploration of the Slaves to Darkness Battle Tome for 4th edition. Now, some people have requested comments on like books that you can read further, and I'm going to start trying to incorporate that as much as I can into my videos. I have a few shout outs here for you. And really how I want to organize this chat to talk about Archaon is essentially more the newer stuff, where his armies stand, what his goals are, and then talk about his home base at the 8 points, which has been a fantastic battlefront in the past, and, spoiler, might be shaping up to be again. And of course, that's where his seat of power is located, the Varanspire. And I want to end it all with a chat about the Varangard, Abraxia, and so on. We're going to talk more about the Warriors of Chaos in general, possibly along with Eternus in another video. But these are Archaon's best and brightest, right? His home base with his elite guard of the Varangard, one of whom is Abraxia. Now, one thing I want to add up top here, a little bit different than most videos, I am organizing a narrative spearhead event for the kids over at Adepticon in the year 2025. This is going to involve 6 unique spearhead tables that will collectively tell a story, and these young wargamers ages 8 to 14 are going to forge their own narrative, which I will turn into a video here on YouTube. However, I do need some starting funds to be able to turn this into an annual event that I can then also share with adults later on. And so I have a GoFundMe going just for a couple bucks to throw it into the pot, grab 5 or 6 spearhead sets as well as some custom bits and trophies, and give these kids an awesome time. Any money that comes in over the goal is always going to be fed directly into prize support for them, because it's really easy to spoil kids. I have another video that goes into more detail about the format, how the games are going to be played, and as well as my qualifications and experience with Adepticon, I'll leave a link to that in the description below, but please consider donating over there. I also want to throw a shout out to Goonhammer. If you're looking to learn how to play Slaves to Darkness or just more about the army, Goonhammer has tactical guides, model kit reviews, painting tutorials, you name it, it is on Goonhammer. And so I want to start our discussion with the man himself, Archaon. Grand Marshal of the Apocalypse, Ender of Worlds, Ever-Chosen. He has a lot of names. I'm going to give you my best sum up. If you are someone who was not around during Warhammer Fantasy battles, I'm going to bring you up to speed. Archaon, in short, is a Chaos Lord character from the Old World with a personal vendetta against the god he formerly served, Sigmar. Since casting off those shackles, he rebelled against the divine and sees the ruinous powers as a means to his personal end, which is total domination or destruction of everything. He is a man who'd rather see existence burn than live under the thumb of false gods and lies. The Old World, meaning the setting of Warhammer Fantasy battles, concluded in the End Times campaign with Archaon winning. He unleashed the full winds of chaos, raised colossal armies, and essentially broke the planet. In the long process of that, he acquired a ton of chaos artifacts of power that have only augmented his abilities more. These are all the named things that he has on his war scroll. His fancy sword, his armor, the Eye of Ed Sheeran. Not to mention the same boons of chaos that he demands of the chaos gods, while bowing to none of them. Over millennia, he has asserted himself as a paragon of hate and evil. He just will not die. He has immortality essentially in the palm of his hand because he's so good at what he does. Every one of the gods is willing to extend his life to let him keep doing it. Now, I will say, if you want to know more about him in the Old World, specifically, his personal vendetta against the gods and his kind of inner monologue, I would definitely suggest you check out Archaon, Ever-Chosen by Rob Sanders. Like I said, it's an Old World setting book about his motivations and thought processes. I have enough trouble keeping up with AOS lore, so doing a full Old World breakdown to me seems a bit daunting. But what I want to focus on in this video is getting us caught up with him in the mortal realms, right? What's been going on with our boy? Because this is the first non-Skaven chaos book that we have, and while the Skavendoom ushered in the addition, it is overall the Hour of Ruin, meaning that's what we're calling this meta-narrative, an overall period of chaos ascendancy. Now, I have other videos talking about Archaon in greater detail about his background and stuff. You can see my playlist on Wrath of the Ever-Chosen or the Realm Gate Wars to see some of the more pivotal moments that have brought us here. But the last real story beat we left off with Archaon before 4th edition was that really he was harvesting Varanite to try and melt open the Gates of Azir back in Broken Realms Morathi. Unless there's something I'm just completely blanking on, he didn't feature too prominently outside of that particular book, which Archaon wasn't really in. It was more just that was his plans going on. And in Wrath of the Ever-Chosen, he starred in, but he didn't do a ton in the era of the Beast, is what I'm saying, the last kind of meta-narrative we had. However, that began to change towards the very, very rat tail end of that story arc, as we were getting little breadcrumbs that the Skaven were up to no good, but the fuller picture of what was going on didn't become clear until the last Dawnbringers book, meaning the last campaign book in the era of the Beast. The events and stories leading up to the immediate moment of the Skavendoom explosion. So let's take a look at what's been going on in the background. So, behind the scenes, Archaon's great game amongst the Chaos Gods took a new turn. The Great Horned Rat had come to the bargaining table of Archaon, and the Ever-Chosen saw a chance to change the great game forever. The idea was very simple. Archaon would assist the Great Horned Rat in their machinations to tear open the heart of Akshi, and his, meaning Archaon's agents, would assist in facilitating all this thing. The results of the explosions did two things. One, it completely changed the course of the fighting in the mortal realms, because now the Chaos Forces have the initiative. And that's kind of how I think about, I call them meta-narratives. It's like, what's the overall theme or the branding of this particular edition, this story? Last one was the Era of the Beast, where it's all in Gur. The Hour of Ruin is what we're in now. And I always see these kind of narratives as who's doing things, right? Who has the initiative? Who's pushing and driving? Right now, it is Chaos. That detonation just straight up evaporated some settlements and redefined the war map in an instant, and formed a chaos bastion right at the throat of one of the realm's largest bastions of order, Hammerhall Akshi, which has a gate leading directly to Azir. And that's just practical war stuff. Even if he didn't care about the Great Horned Rat outside of that, changes fundamentally the tone and the rhythm of the war that's been going on. But there's another huge benefit to this. This time on the back end in the realm of chaos. The devastation and the panicked, selfish frenzy that this stirred in so many souls, all at once, so many, if you're playing fantasy battles, cascading route checks out the nose, it had an impact on the immaterial. In a crescendo of destruction and desperate fear, the Great Horn Rat ascended to the Chaos Pantheon, and the 4 became 5. Which may sound like a negative. Why would the guy who hates gods elevate something to that level? Because Archaon understands that the great game of the Chaos Gods all fighting for supreme power is a trap. And it's a trap he's mastered over millennia. Now the original 4 gods have a new dynamic to contend with, a new player, the ultimate backstabber. In the game of the backstabberiest backstabbers ever. And Archaon gets a new piece on his game board, a new thing that he can leverage or call upon, a new player to make pacts with, to double cross in exchange for. It's just more people that he can coerce or twist blessings from. If he's confident that he can manage the Skaven and the Great Horned Rat within that pantheon, this is only a win for him. And so Archaon agreed. And the Skavendoom is the result of the collaboration. The Skaven had been watching the events of the Broken Realms and the Dawnbringer Crusades about what happens when you detonate realm gates or poison places of power. And I won't go all over the Skavendoom over again. I've talked about it in several videos since 4th edition launched, except to add that Archaon's part of this setup was disseminating his orders to the lowest level to go out in specific locations in the realms and mountain ranges of Akshi and poison them. This fell largely to the Dark Oath tribes, which we were introduced to them in that last campaign book. Specifically, the Brands. Gunnar Brand is a character war band that was hired to go out and do a bunch of this. Or I should say tribes like his. In addition to actively aiding, the Skaven in doing this, because they would be maybe a little bit too conspicuous in some of the places, but Dark Oath tribes could sneak in. Well, in addition to all that, he also now, because he's on the planning board of the Skavendoom essentially, he can prepare all his forces because he knows what's coming and nobody else does. Right? Knowing exactly when Skaven would shift the initiative, everyone do the synchronize your watch thing. And maybe he didn't let the other gods in on it, maybe he did. Regardless, the idea that we get, because whenever a new battle tome comes out in these editions, you always kind of get a sense of like the character's just about to do something. The writers over at Games Workshop are great about making all their books seem like characters have an active role, things they're exploring. Well, the way that this book kind of leaves Archaon is that he is getting set up to launch a multi-punch campaign that seems to be meant to be battering the heart of Sigmar's people in Hammerhall, both sides of it. On the Ghyran side, he has his right-hand enforcer, Abraxia, and she's essentially making sure that Hammerhall Gyra can offer absolutely no aid. She's trying to bleed the forests white. And on the Akshi side, his forces are not quite on the doorstep, but too close for Sigmar's forces to breathe even for like a second. Regardless, the initiative was seized, the grander forces of chaos bowing to him, and the Skaven essentially launched the first wave. And that's kind of where we leave things, with one tiny exception. And I say leave things, I mean as far as like his imminent conquest that he's focused on. This exception is not going to mean much now, but will become a big deal when we talk about Be'lakor. See, we get this snippet that during the era of the Beast, this is kind of like lore that's written retroactively, during that time, one of the many Chaos Citadels in Gur was leveled. Okay, there was a lot of destruction for every faction going on, but upon hearing this, Archaon showed just a moment of his mortal weakness. He lost control in his anger, flew into a rage, and killed 3 of his own Varengard. Now, nothing actually came of that event. I mean, there's 3 dead Varengard, but I mean, like, it wasn't like he disseminated new orders to the army. It was pretty self-contained. But the surviving Varengard, the witnesses, all got to see him show the tiniest weakness in his artifice. Just a little nick, that you could see the inside of, like, there's a person in there, and they do lose control. So again, that will come up later, but as far as the rest of his plans, Archaon just seems to have really put these events into motion to push the initiative, and he's primed and ready for it. But that's just one character. Okay, now we're going to talk about all the things surrounding him. Because at the top, we mentioned that our mad scientist friend needed to produce things to get this meteor planned off the ground. And Archaon is no different. At the heart and soul of Archaon's war machine exists a pocket realm known as the 8 Points. Back in the Age of Myth, it was known as the All Points. It's a relatively small realm, so think of it as like the size of a continent versus the size of a whole world. And what's special about this place is on this little tiny plane, there's a gate to each and every single realm. So this became, in the Age of Myth, when everything was groovy, a huge place of trade and cultural exchanges and all this kind of stuff. It's basically where all the realms came together. Well, when the Age of Chaos kicked off, the Chaos Gods were each preoccupied with a realm that they wanted, like, most greedily. Khorne wanted Akshi, Tzeentch wanted Chaman, the realm of metal, Nurgle wanted Ghyran, Slaanesh was a little tied up and couldn't participate, and the Great Horned Rat wasn't a god. But Archaon, he had the brains, right? Those places, in his mind, didn't matter compared to the strategic value of the All Points. Because he was thinking, if I turned that place into a full military industrial complex, it has a direct door to each and every realm. That's quite an advantageous, place to be. And so that's exactly what he did. When all the other Chaos Gods were focused on other places, Archaon tore into the realms, seeking entrance into the All Points. There was an epic battle of importance here called the Battle of the Burning Skies, and this was Sigmar's last big push to keep Archaon's forces at bay. It's where he lost Gal Maraz, had to retreat back to Azir and start closing the gates. This was his little pocket realm. He defeated a god in battle here, and so Archaon claimed this as his own seat of power. It would become the wound from which he would poison every single realm, save Azir. Well, almost every realm. You see, it was that way for a very, very long time, but since the dawn of the Age of Sigmar, a few gates have been either reclaimed or taken from his control. This was sort of the zenith of the Realm Gate Wars overarching campaign. And I'm doing this off memory, but gates that are shut and under the forces of order, meaning they have the other side in the realm side shut, is Ghyran, Azir, and Akshi. Nagash and his Ossiarch Bone Reapers control the gate to Shyish and have fortified it. Although notably different, the three that the Order have, they just shut the gate and are fortifying, like, the Ghyran side, the Akshi side, and kind of one way cutting off the All Points. Nagash, conversely, went into the All Points with Katakros and built a fortress on that side of the wall. Which is different because that means Katakros is the first hero to actively, have a new army marching on the All Points since the Age of Chaos. Which is pretty cool. The Realm Gate to Gur is stuck in a god beast's mouth. The Iron Jaws freed it from its chaos prison, so the gate is technically open, but it's complicated. You don't really want to go down there. Archaon still firmly holds the gate to the Realm of Metal, Chaman, as he punked several heroes in the process of the end of that book there. And Hish and Olgu are a mystery to everybody. If they were mentioned anywhere that I missed, please let me know in a comment and I'll pin it, but I don't think I have any details on the actual gates going to the All Points, or the 8 Points rather, from those two realms. So he doesn't have a gateway to everywhere anymore, which is good, but it still makes a formidable obstacle to conquerors. It's still the heart of Archaon's power, which is a city at the center of the 8 Points known as the Varanspire. This is where warriors come to train or aspire to be Varangard. It's where his best sorcerers perform their most gruesome rituals for visions of the future. It's, like I said, his industrial complex. It's where he makes his weapons and armors that are all over, cladding his hordes. It is a logistical feat of engineering because food and supplies are streaming in here like blood in the veins, coming from one war front to the other as needed. And at the center of the actual city is the Varen Spire itself, an impossibly tall tower, at the top of which is an empty throne. It's made of the solidified souls of slain kings and molded into kind of an eternal torment, and they act as furniture for the Everchosen. But Archaon has yet to sit on his throne, and they call it the Empty Throne, and the plan is to have it remain that way until Archaon has conquered everything there is to conquer. Because that's, in his mind, when he's allowed to rest. For right now, it is just a physical monument to his hate, arrogance, and power. Now, one thing I sort of breezed over a moment ago was that the Varen Spire is the place where Archaon tests, trains, filters out his Varen Guard. And so let's talk about them. This is the elite military command and warrior echelon of the Everchosen himself. Each one of these Varen Guard is an exceptionally powerful warlord of chaos undivided, but they wanted more than to bow knee to any other god. They believed in Archaon, that someone can refuse the will of the gods, and that this system of divine and mortal can be broken by the mortals. We've seen these characters show up in a few different roles. They can group up, usually with Archaon, and act as his entourage or his bodyguard whenever he goes into battle. But individually, they also all carry the authority of Archaon when he gives them orders. So the Varen Guard can act independently, but also in cohesion. For an example, during the Dawnbringer Crusade, it was the Varen Guard who orchestrated all the Harbingers of Decay to start a great Nurgle ritual which saturated the entire realm in a poisonous rain. They can all co-opt other Chaos armies because they have a higher authority level. So in this case, Maggotkin of Nurgle to the Everchosen's mission, or just supersede the individual warlord's commands. Meaning, let's say they need to recruit some warriors, and there's two Khorne armies that hate each other. Well, they'll stop their quarrel and bow knee to the Varen Guard, and then they'll settle up later. Now, the Varen Guard as a warrior chamber are divided up into 8 tiers of authority and utility, each called a circle. It's interesting because you'd think that the circles are a vertical tier, like people in Circle 1 are somehow better or more elevated than people in the 7th circle, but it doesn't quite seem that way, because the little lore blurbs that we get make it sound more like Archaon assigns like minds to a circle, like birds of a feather flock together. So it's more, I think, accurate to say that there are 8 specialities of evil that are all called circles. The first one is the Swords of Chaos. These are Archaon's finest warriors. They love one-to-one combat. Each of them is a god of war. Abraxia, his number 2 Varen Guard, who we'll talk about in a second, is part of the first circle, as an example. The second is the Souls of Torment. This circle's focus is demonstrating might through sadism. They revel in mortal hopelessness. The example given is lining up defeated warriors and then making them draw lots for who's going to torture their kin. Again, it's just that double-sided of making someone hurt who's giving the pain as well as receiving it. The third circle are the Scions of Darkness. These are your stealth experts. They are unsure if it's a chaos mutation or if it's actually spellcraft, but basically shadows cling to them. It makes them look like mist, and they're treated as outcasts by the other circles, since most Warriors of Chaos seem to associate shadow magic with Be'lakor. But of course, that can be effective in a lot of combat situations. The fourth circle are the Reavers of Chaos. We mentioned briefly that many Chaos gifts can include mutations, and so this circle is made up of premier warrior whose notable attribute is the number of mutations that they can sustain without devolving into spawndom, right? So extra limbs, bug eyes, mandibles instead of teeth, and stuff like that. The fifth circle is known as the Scourges of Fate. These are Archaon's personal assassins. The third circle may concern itself with shadowy warfare, but that's not limited to assassinations. If Archaon wants, armies' morale broken, he'll kill the leaders or all the monsters that they have on their side. We even get a little lore blurb that Bastion Carthalos, one of the most premier Stormcast characters, was sent back to the heavens by a warrior of the fifth circle, so these guys are not messing around. The sixth circle is the Blades of Desolation, and this is just peak raw aggression. Endless armored bodies that hit the enemy like a sledgehammer, no finesse, walk forward, kill, win. The seventh circle are the Bane Sons. They revel in blood drinking and slaughter, and if you just want your enemy gone, call the sixth circle. If you want a spectacle that your enemy's nearby neighbors who are watching can also get scared of, you call the Bane Sons. These are chaos cannibals who look at the flesh eater courts and go, "You think cannibalism is your ally? You think cannibalism is your ally?" And the eighth circle is known as the Blades of the Traitor, which are going to make a fantastic segue to talking about Be'lakor in another episode. But in short, some of the witnesses that saw Archaon's weakness when he killed the 3 Varangard in anger were from the Blades of the Traitor. As a result, nearly the entire 8th Circle has defected to serving Be'lakor and or Eternus, who used to lead them. And so this is our first little introduction to the schism that is rocking the Slaves to Darkness, because even though we have our mad scientist who wants to destroy the world, that doesn't mean there's others out there with a, we'll say, competing vision, which we'll explore more with Be'lakor. Now, I don't mean to be brief, but there really were like 3 sentences of lore for each circle, so that's kind of all we have to work with. The last character I want to mention here is Abraxia. She is a Varangard of the 1st Circle, so a premier warrior on her own, and her rise through the ranks was swift and brutal. She's killed countless champions, or rivals, or enemies, including 4 demon princes under her belt. Before Abraxia, there was no number 2 to Archaon. He just had the circles below him. But she was like, hey, might makes right, correct? I'm going to be assistant to the Grand Marshal of the Apocalypse, and with might asserted herself in that role. Archaon was so impressed by her skill and her moxie, he was like, yeah, we'll make it official. Okay, you want to be number 2? He granted her the title granted her the title Spear of the Ever-Chosen. At that moment, he gifted her also an actual spear weapon forged in Varanite. I think it's actually pronounced Gothagar. I always call it Gobogul whenever I see it in the book. But essentially, it's a chaos spear that anything it touches turns into a chaos spawn, even a graze. In fact, in one of the Dawnbringer campaign books, it actually opens with her charging an enemy force, and like the spear nicks a guy, and it's just the whole story of him like writhing in agony as like other limbs are bursting out of him. It's super wretched. And again, she's in the 1st Circle. She's a fantastic fighter in every sense. But there's a catch that this artifact also has, and that it's also a leash. Remember, it mutates anything that touches it. If Abraxia's willpower or focus slips even for a moment, she will turn into a spawn herself. This is actually why she has some of the mutations she does. So Archaon elevated her, gave her what she wanted, but also put her in a most dangerous position. We met Abraxia at the end of the Dawnbringer Crusades, and what we learned from there is that she is essentially put in charge of the Ghiran front of Archaon's war. In that campaign series, the Order City of Phoenicium was destroyed by Chaos, specifically Abraxia, and it was renamed Blackpyre. And like I said, since Archaon had lost the gate that goes into Ghiran, he doesn't have a centralized location to organize his forces. This is now that place. It is the anchor of Archaon's army in Ghiran. Here, she's prosecuting wars against the other bastions of order, poisoning their food, their water, attacking supply lines, the gates of Hammerhall itself, and more. Basically, never giving them a moment's rest so that they cannot aid Hammerhall Akshi. So we've talked all about Archaon's highest level, right? The man himself, what he's doing right now, poising himself to strike, his home base of the 8 points, the 8 circles of his Varangard, well, I should say 7 loyal circles, and then also the 8th one, and also his number 2, Abraxia. But let me ask you this question, why are these things cool? Well, I kind of spoiled it by sprinkling a bunch of thoughts throughout the video, but the simple part is that this is the highest point of leadership. Everyone else that we talk about in this series wants to be these characters. They flock to the Varanspire to try and be a Varangard. And they are all the worst folks to know. Again, weighed down by the pacts that they made. The pacts and the curses, just like Abraxia and her spear, every one of the Varangard have made deals with the devil, so to speak, to rise in power to get to this point, but it means they're beholden to so much. They're indebted to too many. They're slaves to darkness. And I feel like it's really important to hit both the highest echelon and the lowest, which would, I guess, in terms of power structure, be the Dark Oath tribes. But they're all on that same journey, and that's really why I wanted to highlight in my last video. These folks are no different. And what I love is that wrapped up in this one video, you will see most of the leadership that exists for Slaves to Darkness. Like, of course, there's Be'lakor and Eternus. Those are named characters. That's awesome. They have their own side plot going on that we'll explore. But when it comes to, like, the overall armies, Chaos is often led by Archaon. Abraxia is his number 2. They're having a 1-2 punch going on Hammerhall right now from both realm sides. And his Varangard act as his personal lieutenants, and they can just be disseminated everywhere. We've seen them in multiple stories show up and kind of wrangle different Chaos armies together to get a singular goal accomplished, and then they don't care if they fight each other afterwards. That dynamic makes all of these characters exceptionally interesting. If you have more things that you want to share about Archaon, or, quite frankly, books that you think would be good reads, I already threw out Archaon Everchosen. Please list them down below. I always pin the most helpful comments, but I would love to hear your thoughts of the 3 things we talked about today. Archaon himself, the Varangard, or Abraxia, what is your favorite? I'm going to go with Abraxia. I know she got a rough release because, if you guys don't know this, the year that they released her, they had this like really awkward preview event at Adepticon where they accidentally, I guess, mentioned her lore and the lore behind her spear like 9 times in a row. So by the end, everybody was kind of making jokes like, oh, that's Abraxia. Did you hear her spear mutates people? Like, it was just kind of an inside community joke. That said, the further we get away from that comical event, the more I deeply appreciate like the position that she is in. She's much more knowable than Archaon, much more relatable in terms of struggles. We've already seen her struggle. She got infected with Flesh Eater Court Ness madness in the Dawnbringers books, but she cured herself of that. But like, she's demonstrated vulnerability and conquering things, whereas Archaon is only ever windmill slamming the win button. If he is there on the scene, he dominates the scene, which is good. He should. But for storytelling purposes, I tend to enjoy more relatable characters. The Varangard are fantastic. I feel like every edition that they've put out a battle tome for Slaves to Darkness, they've always added a little bit more intrigue to the Varangard than the last. I mean, now it's kind of a full-blown schism between Be'lakor and Archaon, as we'll explore later, but it wasn't always that way. It used to be very uniform in structure. And so seeing things like that evolve and change has been very rewarding. Anyway, let me know your favorite down below. I would love to read it. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming, friends!